Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on, well, an epic journey through one of the most influential civilizations ever, Rome. We're talking over 1,000 years here. Power, politics, massive change.
Indeed, it's quite a story. From its mythical origins and its gritty rise as a republic, then its transformation into this immense empire spanning continents, and finally its really complex decline and, maybe surprisingly, how its legacy continued in the East.
Yeah, and we've gathered a ton of sources covering pretty much everything. You know, the big wars, the political backstabbing, but also the daily lives of regular people, citizens, slaves. Their art, philosophy, amazing engineering, religion, too.
Exactly. So our mission today is to sort of cut through all that, find the really key insights, and give you a solid grasp without drowning you in dates and names.
We want you to get the big picture, right? So we'll trace this chronologically, hit the key players, the big shifts, and even some, surprising details about how Romans lived and thought. Let's dive in.
Okay, so, the foundations. We have to start with the legends.
Right, Romulus and Remus, the she-wolf. Everyone knows that bit. But the early accounts, they mention something pretty startling. When the early Romans needed wives, they apparently just took them.
That's the story, yes. The rape of the Sabine women. Now, Roman narratives frame this very carefully, not as random violence, but as the origin of marriage itself.
How so?
Well, they emphasize only unmarried women were taken. And supposedly, they'd offered intermarriage treaties first, which were rejected. So they framed it as a kind of just war. This is a fascinating early look at how they justified expansion, even back then.
Wow. Okay, so from these kind of wild beginnings, Rome gets ruled by Etruscan kings. Names like Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius.
Mm-hmm. Their stories, especially from the 6th century BC, are definitely layered with myth. But archaeology actually backs up some details, like Servius Tullius building temples. We have evidence for that.
And then comes the big change, kicking out the kings. 509 BC is the traditional date, right? Establishing the republic.
Precisely. And this meant power shifted mainly to the patricians. These were the big landowning families, maybe 10% of the population. They formed this sort of aristocratic republic.
And everyone else, the common folk.
They were the plebes. They had citizenship, but very limited rights initially. And the tension between these two groups, patricians and plebes, it really shaped the early republic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The plebes, facing this patrician dominance, they actually just left Rome at one point, threatened to start their own city.
They did. The secession of the plebes. It was an incredible power move. It completely terrified the patricians and forced major concessions.
Like what?
Debts were forgiven. Crucially, the plebes got their own magistrates, the tribunes, who had veto power over the Senate and were considered inviolable. You couldn't touch them.
Wow.
And, maybe most importantly, the plebeian assembly's decisions eventually became binding law for everyone, not just plebes. Rome was still an oligarchy, for sure, but this was a huge step towards a more inclusive system.
Okay, so politically they're evolving. What about militarily?
Early on, they used the hoplite phalanx, borrowed from the Etruscans. But a real game changer was their concept of citizenship. You could be a citizen of your hometown and a citizen of Rome simultaneously.
That sounds unusual for the time.
It was revolutionary and absolutely key to their expansion. Look at 338 BC, when they broke up the Latin League. They didn't just crush everyone.
Right.
They incorporated 5 cities directly into Rome, full citizenship. 10 others kept a sort of subject Latin status. It was divide and rule, yes, but also smart integration. It gave people a stake in Rome's success, spoils of war, less military burden sometimes. It made joining Rome attractive.
So this early Rome, it's this mix of ruthless pragmatism and this clever ability to integrate people. That really set the stage.
Absolutely. You see it in the Pyrrhic Wars around 280 BC. Pyrrhus of Epirus shows up with war elephants, terrifying for the Romans. They'd never seen them.
Must have been shocking.
Totally. And Pyrrhus won battles, but took heavy losses, those Pyrrhic victories. What impressed him was Roman resilience. They just kept coming back. He supposedly said he could conquer the world if he had Roman soldiers. High praise from an enemy.
And those wars were just a warm-up, really, for the main event. The Punic Wars against Carthage, starting 264 BC, a century-long fight.
A true clash of titans.
Yeah.
These were imperialist wars, no doubt about it, driven by the oligarchies in both Rome and Carthage wanting control of the Mediterranean.
Carthage was a major power, right? Sea trade.
Huge maritime power. Impressive cities, too, multi-story apartments, villas with plumbing. But interestingly, their society seemed more individualistic than Rome's. fewer big public spaces for communal life, like Rome's baths or forums.
The First Punic War had some wild stories. Didn't a general bring back like over 100 elephants?
Metellus, yes. Captured 130 elephants and paraded them through Rome. Imagine the spectacle. It was pure psychological warfare, showing Rome could conquer anything.
When the story of Regulus, the captured general.
Ugh, Regulus. Sent back to Rome by Carthage to negotiate peace, he tells the Senate not to agree, knowing full well it meant he'd go back to Carthage to be tortured and killed. The ultimate symbol of Roman duty, fides.
Incredible. Then the Second Punic War, Hannibal.
Hannibal, master strategist, annihilates a massive Roman army, maybe 80,000 strong, at Cannae in 216 BC. Huge shock. Italian allies start defecting.
Looked bad for Rome.
It looked terrible. But Rome was relentless. They kept fighting, even with Hannibal rampaging through Italy. But the turning point really came when they intercepted and defeated Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal at the Metaurus River. That cut off Hannibal's hope for reinforcements.
And the end for Carthage. It was brutal, wasn't it?
The Third Punic War, ending in 146 BC, was horrific. A 2-year siege of Carthage. Scipio Aemilianus finally starved them out. Then brutal street fighting in this dense, multi-story city. Just utter destruction. They supposedly sowed the fields with salt afterwards, so that might be a later embellishment.
So Rome wins. Huge influx of wealth now, right? Slaves, gold.
Immense wealth. Mostly bullion and slaves poured into Rome. Italy basically became tax-free because the provinces were paying for everything through exploitation.
But that caused problems internally.
Big time. This flood of wealth completely disrupted the old social order. Massive inequality. Huge estates run by slaves pushed small farmers off the land, creating this growing class of poor, landless citizens flocking to Rome.
And people tried to fix this. The Gracchi brothers.
Yes, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Tribunes who saw the danger. Gaius, around 123 BC, proposed radical stuff, selling grain cheap to citizens, setting colonies overseas for the poor and veterans to give them land.
Sounds sensible.
To us, maybe. But the Senate, the wealthy landowners, hated it. They thought as undermining their power and wealth. Both brothers met violent ends. But the idea of land reform, state support for the poor, it kept coming back.
Meanwhile, all this expansion had side effects, like piracy.
Right. Rome smashed rival naval powers, like Rhodes, partly by making Delos a free port, which undercut Rhodes' income. But Rome hadn't built up its own big navy yet to police the seas. So after the Peace of Apamea in 188 BC, piracy just exploded across the Mediterranean. Rome kind of created the problem it then had to solve.
Enter guys like Marius.
Exactly. Marius, consul 6 times, hugely popular. He represented the public's desire for change. He even tried to use the Gracchi's ideas for land distribution for his veterans, but again, blocked by the Senate. His career also saw Rome grab its first territory in Cilicia, partly as a base against those pirates.
And then things get even messier with Sulla.
Oh, Sulla, a brilliant general, but ruthless. He marched on Rome with his own army loyal to him, not the state. A terrible precedent.
He had a private army.
Pretty much. That was the problem his own later reforms tried to fix. He brutally purged his enemies, including Marius' son, and pushed through laws to strengthen the Senate's power, trying to restore the old order by force.
And this is also when Spartacus happened.
Yes, the huge slave revolt, 73-71 BC. Led by Spartacus, it terrified Rome. It took Crassus, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, a massive effort to finally crush it. Shows the instability simmering beneath the surface.
Okay, shifting east now. Mithridates. Pompey.
Right, the Mithridatic Wars. Lucullus had early successes against King Mithridates of Pontus, but it was Pompey the Great who finished the job. He was granted extraordinary, almost unlimited power by the Manilian law.
Cicero supported that law, didn't he? Seems odd for a supposed defender of the Republic.
He did, yes. Cicero saw Mithridates as a huge threat and believed Pompey was the only one who could handle it decisively, and Pompey delivered. He crushed Mithridates, completely reorganized Anatolia, finished off the Seleucid dynasty in Syria, making it a Roman province. Pompey basically redrew the map of the East.
Then Pompey's own politics shifted.
Yeah, he started out aligned with the popular faction, the Democrats, but gradually moved towards the conservatives, the optimates. Things got so chaotic in Rome, with street gangs like Clodius's causing mayhem, that after Clodius was killed, Pompey was made consul without colleague. Essentially, a sole ruler for a time to restore order.
So the Republic is really creaking now.
It's falling apart. Cicero himself, watching all this, starts arguing that maybe a kind of monarchy guided by the Senate is needed. He wrote, "Unbridled freedom enslaves free people." He saw chaos destroying liberty.
Which brings us, inevitably, to Julius Caesar.
the man himself. His conquest of Gaul was absolutely monumental, earned him huge prestige, wealth, and a fiercely loyal army. The Senate granted him a 20-day Thanksgiving, a massive public honor.
And he was a writer, too.
A brilliant one. His commentaries on the Gallic War. Cicero, who was a master stylist himself, admired Caesar's plain soldier style, but noted it was incredibly effective and artful, deceptively simple.
He knew how to inspire loyalty, didn't he?
Absolutely. Doubled his soldiers' pay, shared the spoils generously, he connected with them, and he pushed boundaries politically, like extending citizenship to Cisalpine Gaul, modern northern Italy. The Senate hated that. They even had one of his newly enfranchised Gauls flogged just to make a point against Caesar.
Which ultimately leads to him crossing the Rubicon River in 49 BC.
Alea iacta est. The die is cast. It seemed like madness. Pompey had more legions, the Senate's backing. But much of Italy was tired of the chaos and the Senate's perceived arrogance. They welcomed Caesar almost as a savior, a god.
And the Civil War.
Against Pompey. It was tragic in many ways. Cicero tried desperately to mediate. He respected both men but felt bound by duty to Pompey. Caesar actually showed remarkable skill, even besieging Pompey's larger army at Dyrrhachium, though he ultimately had to withdraw from that siege.
But Caesar won in the end.
Yes, decisively at Pharsalus. Pompey fled to Egypt and was murdered there. And Cato the Younger, the ultimate Stoic Republican, chose suicide rather than live under Caesar's rule, a powerful symbol of the Republic's end.
Caesar's assassination, though, just led to more war.
Another power vacuum. Years of complex maneuvering and fighting between Caesar's heir, Octavian, Mark Antony, and others. It all culminated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC.
Octavian versus Antony and Cleopatra.
Exactly. Octavian's fleet, under his admiral Agrippa, crushed their forces. That defeat marked the end of the line for the pharaohs in Egypt. Egypt became Octavian's personal property, essentially securing Rome's vital grain supply.
And this is the moment, the end of the Republic, the start of the empire.
Pretty much. In 27 BC, Octavian did something brilliant. He publicly restored the Republic, formally renouncing his emergency powers.
Not really.
Not really. The grateful Senate in return gave him the title Augustus, sacred, venerable, and control over key provinces with the largest armies. He created the Principate. He was princeps, first citizen, not king. But he held the real power. This ushered in the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
He was a master of PR, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Lived relatively modestly on the Palatine Hill, always stressed civilitas, we're all just citizens here.
Mm-hmm.
He made people feel the Republic lived on, even as he consolidated autocratic rule. An incredibly subtle and effective way to govern.
His death was smooth, though, relatively.
Surprisingly peaceful transition in 14 AD, though of course rumors flew that his wife Livia poisoned him with figs to ensure her son Tiberius took over. Whether true or not, it shows how Romans perceived women wielding power behind the scenes, often through intrigue.
And Tiberius, what was he like?
Serious guy. Skilled general. Believed in the old Roman virtues. He tried to continue Augustus's moral reforms, but he just wasn't popular. Gave the people bread, but apparently not enough circuses. Lacked Augustus's touch.
Unlike someone like Germanicus, he was loved, right?
Adored. Got his nickname Caligula Little Boots because he wore miniature legionary boots as a kid in his father's army camps. Later, emperors like Claudius. Well, he was chosen by the Praetorian Guard after Caligula's assassination, and the Senate just had to accept it. Shows how power was shifting, the army becoming more decisive.
And during this Pax Romana, Roman culture really hit its stride. Architecture.
Huge achievements. Influenced by Greece, obviously, but distinctly Roman. They focused on scale, grandeur, and especially utility. Think aqueducts, roads, baths.
Like Frontinus, the aqueduct guy.
Exactly. Frontinus was the water commissioner, wrote a whole book about Rome's aqueducts. He famously dissed the idle pyramids and useless Greek temples, saying Rome's functional aqueducts were far more impressive. That really sums up their engineering mindset.
He found people stealing water, too, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He discovered palaces, workshops, even brothels had illegally tapped into the main water lines. He had to crack down hard to reform the system. A real infrastructure geek and corruption fighter.
What about arts? Music? Games?
They loved music, hosted huge concerts and competitions, but didn't innovate much musically themselves. The games, though.
Yeah.
Gladiators, chariot races. That was uniquely Roman and massively popular.
Where did gladiatorial combat come from?
It evolved from older traditions, possibly Etruscan funeral rites, maybe Greek athletic contests, maybe even hints of human sacrifice far back. It became this huge spectacle, a way for emperors to entertain and pacify the massive, often jobless population of Rome. Bread and circuses, literally.
And religion. still the old gods.
Very much so. They adopted many Greek gods, gave them Roman names, but the focus was really on correct ritual, maintaining the Pax Diorum, the peace with the gods, for the good of the state. The emperor was the chief priest, the Pontifex Maximus.
Did they believe in divination, augury?
Deeply. Reading bird flight, examining animal entrails before major decisions, It was standard practice. Even astrology was popular, though emperors sometimes banned astrologers if they seemed politically dangerous.
And this is also when Christianity starts to emerge.
Yes. Quietly at first, then growing steadily. Tradition holds that Peter preached and died in Rome. By 96 AD, we have a letter from Clement, an early bishop or pope of Rome, writing with authority to the church in Corinth. Shows an early sense of Roman leadership in the Christian community.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing for Christians.
No, definitely not. Pagans like Celsus criticized them. He saw their pacifism, their refusal to serve in the army or perform state rituals, as fundamentally disloyal and dangerous to the empire's security.
Yet eventually Constantine embraces it.
A massive turning point. Later sources suggest Constantine realized the old paganism was, well, a dead faith, and couldn't provide the social glue or spiritual force needed to hold the empire together anymore. Christianity offered something new, something vital.
The Pax Romana had its peak, though, right? Under emperors like Antoninus Pius.
Absolutely. His reign in the mid-2nd century AD is often seen as the high point. Peaceful, prosperous, well-administered. Provinces were content. Sources say foreign states actually asked to be incorporated into the empire to enjoy the benefits of Roman rule. Imagine that.
But things started to go downhill after that. The 3rd century crisis.
Yeah, the 3rd century was rough. Constant civil wars, barbarian invasions, economic chaos. Emperors like Gallienus had to resort to debasing the coinage, mixing silver coins with cheap metals.
Which causes massive inflation.
Rampant inflation. People lost faith in the money. Trade suffered. It destabilized everything. The empire was ruled by a succession of short-lived barracks emperors put up and pulled down by the army.
But some strong emperors emerged from that chaos, like Aurelian.
Yes, soldier emperors from the Balkans, like Aurelian, managed to pull the empire back from the brink temporarily. Aurelian defeated invaders, reunited breakaway regions, but his most visible legacy is probably the massive Aurelian Wall around Rome.
A defensive wall.
19 kilometers long. Built quickly, using forced labor and slaves. It's a powerful symbol of the times the empire was now on the defensive, feeling insecure. And internally, things were fraying badly. Sources talk about neglected cities, ruined villas in the countryside, farms abandoned because peasants couldn't handle the crushing taxes and debt. Many just fled. The foundations were crumbling from within.
And then come the Huns, 5th century.
A major external shock. The Huns were this incredibly effective nomadic war machine. They started basically extorting the Eastern Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, demanding huge annual payments in gold just to not attack.
Yeah.
Protection money, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
And the amounts kept going up. They even captured Romans and ransomed them back for gold. It was a massive drain on Roman resources.
And that gold just made the Huns stronger.
Precisely. Attila could reward his followers, buy weapons, recruit more fighters. It fueled their power and put even more pressure on Rome. A devastating cycle.
So looking back at this whole sweep, it's not just a simple rise and fall story, is it?
Not at all. The Western Empire officially fell in 476 AD, when the last emperor was deposed by a Germanic chieftain. But the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, continued for another 1,000 years.
Still calling themselves Romans.
Absolutely. They faced their own struggles, Huns, Goths, Persians, later the Islamic Caliphates, the Seljuk Turks. They preserved much of Roman law and culture.
And their own innovations, like in architecture.
Yeah, the Basilica Church form really developed there. And intense theological debates, like the big one between Constantinople and Alexandria about Christ's divine and human natures, continue to shape Christianity and the region's politics. The Roman legacy transformed, but it absolutely endured.
So we've covered over 1,000 years. From mythic kings, through the Republic struggles and triumphs, the vast empire, its crises, and its transformation, incredible impact on law, art, engineering, how we even think about organizing society.
It really is an amazing story. Adaptability, engineering genius, complex social structures, but also, a cautionary tale. Even the mightiest empires aren't immune to internal problems and external pressures.
So the takeaway for you listening, maybe understanding Rome's long arc, this constant back and forth between power, people, progress, and decay, maybe that gives us some perspective on the challenges and changes societies face today.
I think so. It definitely makes you wonder, If an empire built with such ingenuity and power could ultimately be undermined by forces it couldn't control, or even forces it unleashed itself, what does that suggest about the foundations of our own societies? How do we balance power, wealth, and stability today? It's a question Rome certainly makes us ask.